Now by Alexandra Saieh. She's the head of the Humanitarian Policy and Advocacy at Save the Children in Washington, D.C. Alexandra, thank you so much for joining us on the program. I mean, you must have been, trying to listen into what our correspondent was saying with that drone buzzing above his head. But he has spoken many times about the situation on the ground, especially in Gaza, where he says every day it gets worse. I mean, today we see people trying to get some of that aid that's trickling in. And they're getting shot at and killed. I mean, how much worse can it get for you?
Every time we say it can't get worse, it does. And right now, Palestinians in Gaza are being given the choice of dying of starvation or risk being killed while trying to get aid in these militarized hubs, these militarized contained zones, which humanitarian organizations and the UN have warned would be absolutely disastrous and potentially lethal. Certainly not enough aid is getting in. What we're seeing is a trickle of aid entering Gaza, and we know for certain that the entire population is still being deprived of humanitarian assistance, that the most vulnerable people in Gaza are not able to access that aid. And most humanitarian organizations and UN agencies are still being blocked from bringing in their trucks. So what's actually entered is a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of what's actually needed.
Indeed, and it seems that the calls from the UN, the statements that they're putting out saying that, we're having a, starvation is now taking hold all across Gaza. All of this seems to fall on deaf ears. Does it perhaps help when politicians like the UK Prime Minister now say the situation is, in his words, intolerable and a ceasefire must come? I mean, so far it seems politics isn't really working when it comes to the war in Gaza.
To be honest, the situation in Gaza has been intolerable for the last 19 months. Yes, the situation is getting significantly worse, but the conditions in Gaza are not survivable. People are being squeezed into tinier and tinier areas. More than 80% of the Gaza Strip is under Israeli-issued displacement orders. No place in Gaza is safe. No place in Gaza has been safe this entire time, with the exception of the temporary ceasefire, where we actually did see largely the bombardment stop, and we did see humanitarian assistance enter. But minus those few weeks, the situation in Gaza has been intolerable. We are seeing things get even worse, and it's difficult to even imagine that. But we've seen in the last few weeks Israeli bombardment intensify. Supplies in the markets continue to be scarce or non-existent. Over the last few weeks, we have heard from families in Gaza that they have been using everything that they can find just to survive, feeding their children grass, leaves, animal feed, and the situation has not improved in the last few weeks.
Indeed. I mean, you say intolerable, but it's also, it is what it is. It's inhumane. Is there any way in which, organizations like yourself can affect any change? I mean, this new aid distribution service doesn't seem to be working. So how could, people like yourselves, Save the Children, actually make an impact here so that at least basics like food do come in so people don't have to feed their children grass?
Well, we've been using the supplies that we've had inside Gaza, but we have not been able to get new supplies in. And that is the same for most other organizations. So we managed to do some water trucking last week. We have still some supplies to treat children with acute malnutrition, but our trucks are not getting in. And that's the case for most organizations. What we have been pleading with the international community and with the Israeli government is to let us just do our jobs. Humanitarian organizations are trained to treat people for malnutrition, to distribute aid safely, and we're just not being allowed to do that. And this new mechanism, we can't really even call it an aid mechanism, but this new mechanism of corralling people into militarized zones has already proven to be deadly. It's displacing people. It's effectively excluding children, the elderly who've already been starved, and people with disabilities are not able to access this assistance. We need to be allowed to distribute aid directly to people where they are. And that's just not happening at the moment.
Indeed. Well, we do hope that you can, keep doing your work. Alexandra Saieh, Head of Humanitarian Policy and Advocacy at Save the Children. Thank you so much for your analysis of the situation in Gaza right now.